Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Season 5, Episode 3. Today I'm talking to an old friend, Nina G. She's a comedian in the Bay Area here, and she's written a few books as well. Her book, Stutterer Interrupted, came out a few years back, and it was a huge hit and had a lot of critical acclaim. And also, she's been featured on NPR's 51%, BBC's Ouch, Psychology Today, Tedx, multiple daytime talk shows, and even Howard Stern. She's been all over the place. She's even been on the Stuttering John Podcast. You may have seen her perform at many local Bay Area comedy shows. She's been all over the place here in the Bay Area. She's just a wonderful guest, and I always love talking to her. So without further ado, I'm going to go right to the interview. And here we go with Nina G. And she's going to be talking about her new book, which is coming out on Valentine's Day, called Bay Area Stand-Up Comedy. It's a history going back pretty far of the Bay Area stand-up history. And on we go. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. Today, I'm very honored to have my old friend Nina G on the podcast with me today to talk about her brand new book. And we're going to talk about her previous book as well. Nina, thanks for being on the program today.
Thank you. Always good to see you and work with you, Dean.
Always good to see you too. So let's talk about Bay Area stand-up comedy, this book that you have come out. I've been hearing you talk about it for the past couple of years. I've been really excited. Tell me about the book.
So it comes out February 14th. I'm writing it with OJ Patterson, who's an old comedy friend of mine. And we did a book that has a ton of pictures. It's like 120 pictures on the history of Bay Area comedy. The first thing we talk about, the first stand-up thing that we talk about in the book is Artemis Ward, who played in San Francisco in the 1860s. And he was a good friend. I know, it goes back that far.
Holy crap.
I know. And luckily, Rich Scheidner, who I'm sure you knew back in the day, he is friendly with me. I don't want to say a friend, but like Facebook friends and comedy friends. He is a comedy historian too, and he is an expert on Artemis Ward. So he helped me out on this information. But Artemis was also friends with Mark Twain, and the first time that Mark Twain ever did anything that resembled stand-up was in San Francisco. So his first time was in San Francisco. And that is kind of a theme of the book, is that a lot of comics developed their voice, and the first time that they ever headlined was in San Francisco. So people like Robin Williams, of course, but just like Dana Carvey and Paula Poundstone and Ali Wong, and like just you go on and on and on. The Bay Area in general, but San Francisco specifically, really had a big impact on comedy. And my thesis basically is everything good in comedy is because of San Francisco, including the brick wall, because we can claim that the brick wall happened at the Hungry Eye first. So anyway, I don't know what you asked me, but I
know you're great. No, so it's funny that you mentioned the Hungry Eye, because I had seen it referenced on Miss Maisel. And I think a lot of people did too, and maybe younger people as well. And I know I've heard about it in movies and stuff. I swear there was a Jerry Lewis film that referenced it. I mean, San Francisco really does, like you said, have like a huge, impact on the comedy scene. And, it's big. Was it like, did people come here to kind of get famous?
I don't know if it's to get famous, but I think the way that San Francisco, no, I don't think it's to get famous, but it's the next step before you get famous.
Okay.
So San Francisco's always been great because it's removed from the entertainment industry.
Right.
So you mess up in LA or in New York, everybody knows. You mess up in San Francisco or you mess up in Oakland, it doesn't get back to the entertainment industry. So that's why it's a great place to develop yourself as a comic. And like in the 80s, there's this big influx of Boston comics who, got tired of fighting with the Boston audiences. And so they came out here, and those are like the Dana Goulds, the Paula Poundstones, the Kevin Meanies, like just it went on and on.
Now, is it because of that? You're a comedian. Do you think it's more laid back here? Do you think it's kind of a better place to be a stand-up comedian, or do you think it's about the same as Los Angeles?
I think it's way, way, way better, because I think there's more opportunities for stage time. There's more opportunities for creativity. And the thing that San Francisco is known for in its style of stand-up is like kind of a combination of the absurd and the improvisational. And you see both of that in Robin Williams. Mort Saul was the first one in San Francisco to really put like improvisational stand up, meaning that not like, oh, someone give me a job and an animal and I'm going to do a skit. No, it's more of just going off the cuff and talking and going there. But in the 70s, it got more absurd. And that style, I think, still permeates, although I'd like to see more of it. But San Francisco and the Bay Area is basically the next stop. So people are able to get that stage time in. They're also able, because there's like 100-mile radius of towns and cities that people can play. So San Francisco comic can go up to Santa Cruz and Modesto and to Sacramento, so that they can really stretch themselves, so it's just not all Bart and Muni jokes.
Now, on the cover of the book was one of my favorite comedians, Phyllis Diller, and she's local. I think she's from actually Dublin or Pleasanton. Alameda. Oh my God. Okay.
Generation Alamedian, so it's very important that you get that right.
Okay. Sorry.
And she's not from there, but she lived there, and that's where she started.
Now, she was one of the first female comedians to get big in the United States. And I won't mention Maisel again, but they kind of touch on what it was like to be a female comedian back in the late 50s, early 60s. Were there other comedians that were from here, that were female, that were breaking ground here? Was this kind of like a launch pad for women comedians?
I mean, I think she was the first one to break through in a mainstream steady way. Like, you had Moms Mabley, who was in the Chitlin circuit and had been killing it for years, but she didn't get onto mainstream TV until after Phyllis Diller. And Diller broke through in like the late 50s. And so she's just very interesting, because also like she got into it a little bit later, and like her first paying gig, she did a party and she got a live turkey that they gave her on a string, like they had the turkey on a leash, and she walked it home to her home in the projects of Alameda, where they lived, and she tied it up, and the turkey got free. And then her neighbors found it. It was like, oh, this must belong to the Dillers.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so they're like, we know that you and your husband, because your husband's kind of useless, we know that you can't butcher it, so we will, but we get to take half of your turkey. So her first payment was half a turkey.
Oh my God.
And this is the stuff that I love. This all happened in Alameda in a housing project. And so then, but she eventually started, and she was inspired by a woman who was performing at the Purple Onion, and she just happened to meet this woman's acting coach at a jazz club. And so that's when they started to develop the act. But in terms of other female comics, I mean, who had developed themselves in San Francisco, there were lots of them. I mean, Ali Wong, I think, is one of the prime examples now.
Right.
Chelsea Peretti, who is from Oakland. So, you know, there are current ones too, but I think the one that really left an impression on me, which, like, I am very much a snob when it comes to stand up. It's like, oh, improv isn't stand up, but this group called Femprov, which started in the very, 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 very late 70s, had a major impact on San Francisco comedy, in part because they started Cobb's Pub, which is now Cobb's Comedy Club. And so Femprov like went to the owner of Cobb's Pub and was like, let's make this into a comedy club. And the women set the stage. They were the opening night act, and eventually people kind of forgot it's a root of that. But I was really happy to capture that part in the book too.
You must have had access to some amazing research resources. What were you able to get? What kind of gold mines were you able to tap here?
Okay, well, very few people, because they are younger, will understand why I almost cry when I talk about this, but you will understand. I got to talk to Don Novello, who plays.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
Carducci. So I talked to him for like an hour, and like, I know. Dean has his mouth open because he knows how important, and like, I am an Italian American Catholic. Like, I believed in him longer than the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. I didn't know Father Guido Sarducci wasn't a real priest until I was like 10.
A lot of people, I think a lot of people thought he kept trying to tell, I'm not actually this person.
But he also said that like he had told me that he didn't understand people like the Unknown Comic, who would always say, this guy known as the Unknown Comic, like they always wanted their name in there. He really liked kind of embodying the character, and so it was so cool to talk to him and hear how that character was developed in San Francisco. And like the cape that he wore, that was later confiscated in the 1980s at
oh my God,
Vatican, and he eventually got it back, but he was arrested at the Vatican for impersonating a priest.
That's awesome.
I know, right? And so that same cape was bought at a St. Vincent de Paul's in San Rafael for $7.50. So like, for me to know, like, oh, that street over there is where he bought his cape, very exciting for someone like me. And then also, like, I find it very ironic that not only was there like this divine intervention, this spiritual intervention of it being a St. Vincent's, but then he developed his act at the Intercession Coffee House, which was like kind of the grittier place to do comedy, where like people could really develop themselves, and it was a bunch of hippies in there. But he developed that character at the Intersection, which was ministry in the basement of a church.
That's beautiful.
Is that beautiful?
I love him. He's so funny, and I loved his Laszlo Toth series.
Yes, and I have this book, which maybe I'll show you after the thing. He did this book of, it's like a yearbook, but it's all sheep. So it's like a sheep high school. Just the weirdest, most absurd thing. And what was really cool about, because there's probably about 15 oral histories that me and OJ took, which, you know, you don't get like the full thing in there, but you get snippets. You can hear the comedy voice in how they talk. So someone like Stephen Pearl, who is a one-liner guy, he would talk and talk and talk, but then like you would just get this really, really great little sentence, and I would insert that in the book. And for someone like Novello, it was just like an absurd little weird sentence that just worked great in the text. So I was really happy to get those, to have comics lend me not only their histories, but also their comic voice.
Now, have you had any feedback from the comedy kind of community about what you're doing, and like maybe kind of a sense of appreciation for it? Because I don't think we always have a lot of good records of this. I think you've found, doing your research, haven't you, that this has been kind of hard to find?
Yeah, you know, and it's weird because like people don't appreciate comedy as an art form, and that includes stand-up comics. Like,
Right.
it's like, yeah, how are people going to appreciate you if you don't appreciate your past? So yeah, no, people are very excited about it, especially the people from like the 80s boom who like, there's never been one book on San Francisco comedy. So this
Right.
is like the first one that's like encompasses a lot, and like it's very much a primer. Like this is the first book, and like every single chapter should be a 400-page book. But there was a response at first from some of the older comics that was like, oh yes, people have been trying to write this book for years, and it's just impossible. It's not. You just kind of pick and choose, like, and that's where Rich Scheidner, who did, I recently saw his one-person show on the history of stand-up. He states that a history of stand-up is just that one history of stand-up, because there's so many ways that you can go. So you know, this is one story, and in the book I say you should go ahead and write your own book, because there's lots of ways that you could go with this.
Now, for our listeners who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? Because you cover a lot of diverse areas. Like you're a stand-up comedian, but you also work in different fields as well.
Yeah, so yes, I do comedy, but I'm also a counselor at a community college, and I have my doctorate in psychology. I came to comedy almost 12 years ago, and that was after, like, because when I was a kid, my dream was to be a comic, and I would write material, and I would read about it. Like, I was obsessed. Like, this book is a long freaking time coming. Like, this is a life's work that I just did during the pandemic with my friend who's also obsessed. But my dream to be a stand-up died when I was 17, because I was like, I stutter, and this isn't going to happen. I've never seen anybody do stand-up who stutters, so I'm done. But it wasn't until after I went to a conference for people who stutter that I was like, okay, I came back, and I was like 35 at the time. And I was like, okay, I could see where I have been not engaging in my full self, and that I have kind of let the stuttering or the stigma that I placed on stuttering, that I kind of put that in the forefront, and how much it had held me back in relationships, in jobs, in so many things. So when I came back from that conference, I made a number of changes in my life. And 6 months after that conference, I started comedy, which now it's been almost 12 years.
Now, I want to ask you about your first gig. I know you talked about this in your first book, Stutter Interrupted, but your first gig was pretty palpable for you. Can you tell our listeners about that?
I mean, it was, I like when I dressed the way that I thought a female comic would dress. Like, and I know for you that means shoulder pads.
Yeah.
And a blazer. Not like that. Not so 80s. But I had like wedge heels and jeans and a shirt. And I performed, and I got laughs, and like initially when I started doing comedy, I was kind of like, people are laughing at my stuttering jokes. Do they stutter? Because like I couldn't imagine people who didn't stutter relating. And I was like, oh no, they relate to it because hopefully it's funny. And so, a lot of times people will say that the fastest connection between two people is humor and laughter. And so going into comedy as a disability advocate, I really tried to bring that, and that being influenced by a lot of African American comics, and especially someone like Dick Gregory, who blended that activism and stand up, and always stayed true to the activism.
Now, you touched on something that made me think of something very topical. For a lot of us, comedy is this weird kind of litmus thing where it identifies us, or we identify with it. So like, I know in my household, comedy can almost be something that causes arguments, because my kids may listen to comedians I don't necessarily care for or object to for various reasons. And they might not like something I listen to because they might think it's boring because I'm older and I have a weird sense of humor. So do you find that like it could be, you said like, because people can often be brought together by comedy. Do you find it can often be, especially these days in the days of social media, it can be like polarizing and kind of cause conflict maybe even?
Yeah, yes. But I think for people for the comic who is talking to that audience, there is a connection there. But also, if you think about it, like when Bill Hicks would piss off an audience, he was connecting with that audience as well. So like,
Yeah.
there is the antagonizing of the audience, which is also connecting. So that's a very interesting way to look at it too.
Now, you like a comedian that, like, there were comedians in the past, like Andy Kaufman, who had a different take on it, who would kind of work against like stretching the minds of the audience, maybe doing a piece that was more art sometimes. But you like a comedian, Brother Theodore. What would you call his type of comedy?
I don't know. I have no idea. Well, dark as hell. I don't know if I can say the F word here. But to me, he is so interesting because he totally antagonizes people. And also his background, I don't know if you know his background. Okay, so he was super rich back in Germany from a Jewish family. His family owned the equivalent to Vogue there.
Right.
And like he was just gonna be like a playboy. He was just gonna like play chess and date women, and then the Holocaust,
Right.
or Hitler happened. His family was totally uh, uh, obliterated. He was in a concentration camp, and the Nazis said, you have to sign everything over in order to live. So he signed his entire fortune over. Then his mom may have had an affair with uh, Albert Einstein, who got him to France.
Oh,
Then he was
wow.
in France. He got kicked out of France for being a chess hustler.
Oh, wow.
And then he moved to America, where he was a janitor at Stanford, did not know English, and then eventually found his way to performance art in New York, where he did a show not nightly at this little black box theater. And in his stuff is so dark, and when you hear it, you're like, this is really gross and kind of weird, and what the hell is this? But when you look at his background, like his parents killing each other in this one bit he has, and then he eats the oil that was made from his parents' death, like he ingests the oil. Nothing compared to his background and the traumas that he experienced. So like, he's so funny, he's so weird, and the dynamic between him and Letterman was always the thing. Like I was a dyslexic, stuttering kid in Catholic school, and I would go through the TV guide and see when he was going to be on Letterman, so that I could take a nap in the afternoon, so I would be awake. So like, he spoke to me when I was a kid, and he still does.
That's awesome. Trying to think. It's funny because so many comedians were able to use comedy to protest, and like to like during the 60s, the Smothers Brothers, I think, had trouble with the networks.
Who are from the Bay, or they developed in the Bay.
Yeah, and they were able, a lot of comedians were protesting the war, protesting all kinds of things. Lenny Bruce was protesting a lot of social things. And now we've gone weirdly where I think Fox tried to make their own Saturday Night Live, where they had like conservative comedians, and it didn't quite take off. I think it kind of stunk the room up. Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that, but yeah, I mean, so what I think personally, which is going on, is that comics have stretched the free speech laws
Right.
in this country, and they continue to in places like Canada. But we've always had free speech that comics have had to have challenge. And in fact, Lenny Bruce's first case was in San Francisco, and it was for saying three things that I won't get into. But the fact that it was said in North Beach, in San Francisco, next to a strip club, and down the street from Ferminghetti and City Lights Books, that had published The Howl, who also faced an obscenity trial. Because of all that, it was like, oh, the community standard of North Beach is such that, like, yeah, this is not obscene. This is like run of the mill. And so, like, it's all of that work in a legal sense has led us to this point where the government isn't going to tell us what we can and can't say. So I kind of feel the culture is telling us that. And so, like, community standards within the culture are coming up. And so I think that's kind of what is pushing some of the, I don't know if it's a PC culture, that cancel culture, but that's also something we've always had. I mean, ask
Right.
that Daddy Arbuckle about being canceled.
Yeah. I always laugh about that. You're exactly right. I mean, we've had cancel culture forever. This is nothing new. Although I think you get blocked on social media, but in the past they would arrest you. So, I mean,
right, yeah, no, it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, not so bad now.
And then also, I think that our politicians are saying crazy stuff that the comics should be saying, but they don't have the consequences that the comics have. So I also kind of feel like we're exerting some control over comedy because we can't exert it over politics.
Yeah, and it's weird because, people can say so much now, and I remember it's funny because we look at cases like you mentioned with Lenny Bruce, where he was getting jailed for obscenity, like literally going to jail. I think young kids can't even conceive of that nowadays, but he kind of did it. He did it for their sins.
No, he was our martyr. So
yeah, he's showing up so much more. And I think there's been a resurgence in interest in him. For our folks that are not aware of your first book, I wanted to have you talk about a little bit about Stuttered Interrupted. Can you tell our listeners about a little bit about your first book?
Sure. It's just my journey into stuttering and stand-up. So it has a lot of stories from my childhood, from my adulthood, just a lot on what it's like to be a person who stutters, and that one piece about that journey into self-acceptance and finding community, which led me to my first love of comedy, which I had since I was a little kid.
Can you tell us about some of your favorite comedians?
Oh my God, there's so many. I mean, I think as a woman, no, I will start with this because I'm looking at it right here. It's my whole kitchen is comedy. So I have a Lenny Bruce picture in back of me. I have 6 albums on my wall here that are like some of my, like some of the ones that I think are the most important, like Dick Gregory, the Smothers Brothers at the Purple Onion, and my Edith Ann. And so, okay, so Lily Tomlin, I found her when I was a kid, and she had her Edith Ann character. And in second grade, I made a hand puppet at school, and I named it Edith Ann. And then I always kept it. It was one of my favorite things. And then I met Lily Tomlin, and she signed it. So I have it signed, and it's right there in my kitchen. But also the thing that I was first looking at was my autograph picture from Emo Phillips that I got when I was 13.
Oh, so lucky.
I know, right?
I love him.
Because that was the first fan letter that I ever wrote. And he sent that back. It was very special. And since then, like whenever he's in town, I will go and see him. And he is well aware of me, because every time that I see him, I will ask him like, okay, I'm going to ask him one thing, and then I won't bug him anymore, but I'm going to ask him about religion. I'm going to ask him about this, about his development on this. And so he's just been very sweet whenever I've met him. And in fact, right before the pandemic happened, it's at like March 5th week, all the shows closed, especially the big shows. He was at the Sacramento Punchline, and I drove there from Oakland, and he was the last like real comic I saw before the quarantine. And I was like, who better to see in the apocalypse other than emo. So I stayed for 2 of his shows.
That's a good choice. I have never seen emo. I've always wanted to.
You have to. Next
I have
time
to.
he's in town, you have to come with me.
I will. I promise. I love him. I like, you ever notice? How's it? I love his voice.
Yeah, no. And when I was a kid, I was like, maybe emo and Bobcats stutter and they talk that way. And maybe I should do something like that so I'm fluent. So yeah, they had a big impression.
I love Bobcat too. And it's funny because I had only seen like his comedy act, and then I got to see him interviewed where he'd be very serious. And I'm like, I think I really fell in love with him then, because he's so brilliant and his writing for movies is just so good. He's such a good writer.
Clown. You gotta love Shakes the Clown.
Yeah. He's great. I mean, yeah, he's just so wonderful. I love him so much. I like, because you got a really diverse palette of people you like. You're all over the map. I think people look at me and they could pretty much tell, oh, you must be a Bob Newhart fan.
The button down comic, yes.
Now, what was your first comedy album that you had?
Well, the first album that I ever bought with my own money was Steve Martin, the Brothers album.
Yes.
Which was comedy on one side and banjo on the other. So I was a little disappointed by that. I wanted all comedy. But that was my first album that I ever bought. And, finding Steve Martin when I was 4 was like kind of the thing that really left an impression.
Did you ever do the thing like we would invite friends over? I didn't always have friends, so it was a rare occurrence, but I would invite kids over after school and we would sit and get some Kool-Aid and listen to comedy albums. We listened to Bill Cosby. We would listen to, Steve Martin, of course, like you said, and it was just so fun to listen to this stuff. My father had some old ones and we didn't know what they were, what the references were. So it was really weird. And we almost died. We were listening to one, it was Jackie Gleason doing Crazy Guggenheim. I still have this. In fact, it was looking at me this morning from the bottom of the record rack when I was going to work this morning. I was laughing because it's such a weird image, but we didn't know what Crazy Guggenheim was or what the reference was. And we listened to it. We were just like dying of laughter going, what the hell is this? And nobody would explain it to us. I'd ask my parents, they go, I don't really remember. We don't know.
Well, and that is the thing, is that like every comedy album is kind of like a time capsule, that it encompasses like the culture of that time, and the references and all of that. So it doesn't have to be all of the Kennedy stuff. It could just be Chris Rock and how he looked at something at a certain time. So it's very interesting in that way.
It's funny because we'll share comedians. I don't know how many people, we don't have the water cooler anymore, of course, but people will stand around the office and they'll imitate comedians or talk about comedians. We share that. And it is kind of a weird time capsule, because I think now nobody would know what John and Marcia were, but back then people were like, John, Marcia, and everybody was doing that bit. And it really does, it gets under our skin so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nina, I wanted to thank you for being on the show. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. And I want to mention that your book is coming out on Valentine's Day, February 14th. It's going to be out, and will it be available on Amazon ahead of time?
Yeah, it's actually on there now, and it's already getting pre-ordered. There's already been a couple of orders for it. So yeah, people can find it there and pre-order it. But go to your favorite independent bookstore, and this is with History Press, and they have racks of books at CVS, so it may be staring at you as you buy condoms. I don't know, we'll see.
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that imagery. If I ever see that, I will take a picture of that and put it on Instagram.
Thank you.
And also they can purchase your first book, Stutter Interrupted, online as well. And I will put your website information in the bio so they can catch you at one of your comedy acts.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Dean. Always
Thank
good
you.
to work with you.
That was author and comedian Nina G. She's here talking about her book, Bay Area Stand-Up Comedy. That'll be out to be purchased on February Valentine's Day. You can purchase it also in advance on Amazon as well. You can also pick up her book, Stutter Interrupted, as well. It's a really great book, a biography about her life as a comedian. Also, we're going to post Nina's website on the bio link. You can read her bio and look up her website, and you could also subscribe to check out her comedy shows. She has listings on that you can find out where she's playing and go see her. She's a great comedian, and you'd love to see her shows. She's always a hit, and I always love seeing her perform. Coming up on Friday, we're going to have food writer Catherine McBride. She'll be talking with us about her writing and her work as a chef. And she also disclosed she was a local chef at Chez Panisse, so I was surprised to find that out. So that'll be on Friday, and then we're going to have on Monday Michelle Tam from Non Paleo. She'll be with us on Monday. You probably know her from online. She has many great books on paleo cooking out, and you'll really enjoy hearing that one as well. So look forward to having you listen to our podcast and the rest of the week. I hope you really have a great rest of your week, and until we hear from you again, happy cooking.